Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today for the Friday Masterclass, where today we're going to be talking about color masking and tracking and using some of the more advanced features in the Lumetri Color Panel. Something I like to revisit usually once or twice a year. A little bit of a refresher for some, and if you're kind of new to Premiere and new to getting into basic color workflows, I'm just going to show you, there's always many ways to do these kinds of things. I'm going to show you some really easy ways to use some basic tracking to affect specific ranges of color in your video. If you've ever used Photoshop, you've probably done this. Kind of works the same. And at a later date, we'll revisit some of this doing similar types of things in After Effects, which has way more advanced tracking capabilities, particularly when things are sort of off screen or moving or bending or distorting and you need very specific things to be tracked with a really accurate mask. After Effects is really the most ideal for that in conjunction with something like Mocha, which you can use directly. It's built into After Effects. But in any case, we're going to be revisiting some of this stuff in Premiere. So as always, we're coming to you live across a couple of different networks here. So thank you so much for joining. And I'm just going to check and make sure that everything's looking good over here. I'm not seeing my stream on Adobe Live. So that's weird, and someone's saying my audio's off. So good start. All right, let's see what's going on Adobe Live. Well, I'm gonna press on. I'll let them fix it on the back end, and hopefully it's fine-ish. Okay, so let me, I'm gonna move over to Premiere Pro. And let's see. Let's start with this, and let's get moving. All right, well, it looks like we are live, so okay. All right, bummer about the audio thing. In any case, you may have noticed too, the studio is not yet done if you pay attention and watch. A couple new additions in the background here. There's the old Studio Revox now making a visual appearance. I did a post recently about, after cleaning up the studio, I also found my missing iPad. All this vintage gear that I have and how it's probably time to start parting with some of this stuff. And while I love and have used that Revox for well over 2 decades and it's amazing, and I have tons of 1/4-inch tape, and I still occasionally do for a couple bands that I sometimes work with, I'll do some mastering to it and then cut analog style, actually cut their master, physically cut the tape and cut their master tape on there and create different sorts of things for them. You know, it's great, but I'm kind of running out of space and desire. So at the moment, it's taking up that space over there. It works well. We'll see. And then there's a new old featured keyboard here, which has never been on stream. If you know what it is, here I'll just go full screen for a second here. If you know what it is, let's see in the chat. And if Tim's listening, I don't know why I'm still seeing I'm seeing Sin Lagos on Adobe Live, but if I'm live, I'm live, so okay. Or at least on Behance, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing Sin. Okay, so what is this? Anybody know? Do you know? If you know, you know. Yeah, all right, what am I gonna do? Okay, so here we go. Let's go back. All right, so here's a quick clip. Just take a quick look at this. This was done at like 240 FPS. And the reason I pulled this one up is because this might be an example of something where, you know, for whatever reason, and I remember when I shot this, this is my son's bike, and it has this kind of fluorescent green thing over here. And that color, it just really stood out to me, and it was fine. It's kind of interesting, but I didn't love it. Now, by the way, this is not moving a great deal. If I just quickly turn on some guides here, just pay attention. If you notice, I'll play this back, it is moving slightly to the right, all right? So my point here is that if we wanted to affect, you know, just that color range, how would you do it if you didn't know how to do it, right? And you have all of these sliders and tools in the Lumetri Color Panel, and if you just start up at the top and basic corrections, obviously that's not going to help you because any change that you make here is global. So, you know, if we affect the warmth, it's going to warm everything up, but it's also warming up that fluorescent green down there. Similarly with any sort of tinting or anything that we're going to do. And ultimately, that's not going to help. Now, we have our selective color curves, which we're going to come back to in a second here, which we could also use, but that's getting a little more advanced. Let's just talk about some basic things where maybe you just want to affect the color of a very specific area of your shot. And this is something that you can use in a lot of different ways. So let's talk about how you track something on screen in Premiere Pro. And you do this very easily inside of the effects controls here. All right. I really wish I could see the stream. Give me a second here. This is really irritating. Yeah, I'm not even seeing myself up there. Why is that? I can't see your comments, so. What was I saying? Effects controls. So up in the Lumetri Color section of the effects here, you'll see that we have three different types, or three different ways to create a mask. You can create an ellipse, you can use a polygon, or you can use a free draw Bezier. So if I wanted to, say, affect just this little fluorescent green section of the bicycle here, I'm going to use my free draw Bezier, and actually I'm going to first, let's just scale this up. Whenever I'm drawing masks, I like to kind of zoom in on the view here, so you can do that very easily. I'm just using the zoom controls down here, all right? Just makes it a little bit more easy to be that much more accurate. And I'm going to take my pen tool, essentially, and let's just create a little mask like that, okay? Now again, I missed a little bit of the edge here. Don't worry about that for this moment. We'll fix that. And in fact, here I can even just draw another point because that is going to bother me. All right, something like that. Maybe bring this edge in a little bit like that. Okay. Basic mask here. And that mask is now masking the effect itself of Lumetri Color. Okay. So right away, before we do anything, if I start adjusting, say, the temperature slider, notice that it's only affecting the colors in the mask section. Makes sense. Again, if you've done this in Photoshop or after, you kind of get the concept of how this works. Now, the difference, of course, here is that this video is moving. So we need to track the motion, even though slight, right? It starts to move off to the right. Well, that means eventually you'd start to see that color disappear. Well, not eventually. You'd see a frame later, it would be gone because we haven't done anything. So we need to track the motion of that. Well, we make it really super easy. It's not manual. It's really, really easy. Here under Lumetri Mask, you have Mask Path. And if I simply tap the play button, track selected mask forward. Now this is 120 frames per second, so even though it's 10 seconds, got a lot more frames to do, so this would normally be a lot faster for a 10-second, 24-frame clip. It's still moving pretty quickly. All right, you can see the progress there. It has now tracked the motion. And you'll see that as I now scrub through this, right? And now this gives you an idea too. Like again, it's not moving a lot, but it is moving laterally to the right. this was handheld, right? It is now, and I said right again, it is now moving with that selected area. So as mentioned, if I wanted to, say, turn this into more of an orange, or maybe I wanted to even desaturate it a little, or maybe saturate it and bring down some of the highlights on that, maybe even adjust the exposure a little. When I play this back, it stays consistent. Now, you're seeing a little bleed through here in some of these sections because I drew that mask pretty tight. Well, you'll also notice that we have feathering and expansion capabilities. So if I expand the mask, kind of see what that looks like here. Now again, if I expand it too much, you'll see that it's going to start to warm everything up. We don't want to do that. So I'm just going to expand it a little bit beyond into the, I don't know what that area of the bike is called, but there's some reflecting of that color onto the, just below the spokes there. So I'm going to expand it just a little bit there. And then I can also feather it to kind of smooth what it's doing at the same time, okay? Now again, maybe this is not necessarily the ideal thing that I want to do here. You get the idea. Now, if I wanted to actually change the color with a little bit more precision, this is where we could do something using our hue saturation curves, or something that's also known as selective color. And here we have something called hue versus hue. And what that means is it's going to allow you to adjust the actual hue of an existing hue in your shot. All right, does that make any sense? Maybe not. Let me show you how it works. Very simple. We want to take this hue, which is fluorescent green, and turn it to something else. So I'm going to take the eyedropper right here, select that range, and immediately it gives me these 3 control points, kind of identifying sort of the center point color. Now, do I have anything done up here? Oh, I have the highlights down. Oh, and I have the saturation up. So it's seeing this as a bit more yellow than green. Again, we can modify these points. Now, if I hold down my Shift key and I start moving up, note right away, see if I can do this, 2 hands. Oh, I can't zoom in at the same time. You're getting a hue display vertically. So what that means is that as I move through this now, you're seeing we're able to change the hue dynamically. So maybe we want to turn it into a blue to match the sky. But as you're also seeing, it's kind of not getting everything. So this is where we can expand the range, as you can see I'm doing here. And I could also theoretically come in here. Now again, we're getting a little bit of sort of color reflection. It wouldn't be that same color blue because it was darkened, so that's fine. We could come over here and select this hue as well. It might give us another control point, which it did. And there you can see that's turning a bit more of that cyan color. So now we've kind of married these together a little more dynamically. And there you have it. So before, yellowish, fluorescent yellow green. After, now it's like that nice cyan blue. And we were even able to affect the shadowed area by selecting the eyedropper, adding that other control point, and then expanding that a little bit more. All right, before, after. And all done with a very simple mask, a little bit of feathering, individual controls up here, and then to actually change with a little bit more precision the hue so that we have the full rainbow of colors here, we used hue versus hue. All right, let me go, I'll put my cam back on for a sec and I'll bounce over to YouTube. Let's see if I can see any comments there. Yeah, Tim, why am I not seeing, I'm not seeing the stream on Behance, like in the app. That's really weird. And no one's commenting here, so. Bummer. All right, well, as it is. Oh, now it is. There we go. Okay, well, let's see if I can see him now. Finally. Okay. All right. Let's go back here. So that's one quick example with Lumetri, hue versus hue. Let's do a little bit more with this and kind of use the tracking here to do a little bit more, sort of pushing the capabilities of Premiere. But I'm going to show you, you don't even have to be all that accurate. You can still get a pretty decent result. Gino Marbella, I'm not really a color correction guy, but I do find HSL a little cumbersome. It is. We're gonna come back to HSL, and I'm gonna show you it is a little cumbersome. The UI is it's good actually. Once you sort of wrap your head around it, it makes sense. Cumbersome is a good word because there's just a lot of sliders. There's a lot of stuff happening here. By the way, for anyone, we're talking about this section here. So I have to admit, all of this is part of HSL that you're seeing right here. It's pretty good, but yeah, it's a little cumbersome, but you're gonna see in a minute, we could actually do some cool stuff with this. All right, so this is a shot I've shown before on screen. Shot this in Giza. This is the big pyramid. You can see my buddy Terry White in the foreground over here. It's from a long time ago. And in this particular shot, this was shot with a Canon 7D, I believe. We were very lucky. We didn't have anybody around that day. It was almost creepy. We were sort of all alone in Giza somehow, which is crazy because there's always thousands and thousands of tourists. And I think once we started experimenting, walking around all the pyramids, we suddenly found ourselves sort of alone. It was crazy. So, and it was sunny. It was a sunny day. Sky was very sort of blown out. Now, this is about 13 or so years ago, right when I started getting into DSLR, the beginning of the DSLR boom, when Premiere really sort of became a new app for a lot of people. And I was very new to shoot and had never shot video on a DSLR. So, I mean, it's exposed. It's a little overexposed. I mean, there's still some decent cloud detail in here, but you know, the clouds themselves, this is pretty much, and remember, this is 7D, 2010-ish, 2009. This is, you know, H.264, 8-bit. That's pretty much just blown out, right? There's no, maybe there's a little, you can see there's a little bit of detail there. A little bit. I didn't do a bad job of exposing. I should have underexposed a little bit more. But, you know, you learn. That was kind of the beginning of that whole journey for me. In any case, we want to take this and, you know, once again, I could apply some color to this. I really wanted to warm up. The pyramids are actually, when you see them up close, there's just more, there's a bit more color. And as the sun starts to set, as we found out later in the day, it really turns this golden color. It's really quite something. You know, it is. You just have to see it. You've seen it in photos. So in the same way as we discussed before, you know, we could warm everything up. Now this actually feels somewhat representative of how it looked on that day. I mean, the sky was blue, but it also had this sort of gold hue. But it's not, I mean, that's okay, but I don't know, right? It just, something looks a little off. Sky is still blue, but it's too warm to be blue. I don't know. That's not what I want. I want the sky to still, I want there to be a bit more contrast, right? With the color. Stop saying right. So I need to track this independently. Now I also could use hue versus sat potentially to do that, but I don't really want to affect necessarily all of the ground with the same level of saturation that I want to affect the pyramid. You understand? So this is, again, where tracking is going to allow us to just kind of zero in on a specific range, affect the color there, and then we can use multiple layers of Lumetri to do other things on the rest of the shot or the overall shot. And I'm gonna do that too. And ultimately, I have a finished version here just to kind of show you, this is what we're going for. So here's my finished one, okay? And this is really how it felt being there. You have this sort of gold pyramid and this very deep, sort of rich blue sky with these clouds that just seemed very low. All right, so this is what we're going for, but this is where we're starting. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to track again. Now, we have a discrete problem here, which is that, as you can see, the pyramid, you know, it was so large and I was as far back as I could stand where we were. I couldn't get the whole thing in the shot, so I had to do this kind of, you know, pan across left to right to get everything. Now, as I mentioned, if you're using something like the After Effects Tracker or Mocha and After Effects, where it does planar tracking, specifically in Mocha, it's actually not a big deal to track things that are off screen because you can draw them on the canvas and it sort of figures out, oh yes, that's it, as it reveals itself where it should be. This is similar to what Rotobrush 2 does. You can have elements off screen and it just kind of knows. Well, Premiere doesn't. It guesses, but it does an okay job, maybe not a great job. So what I might want to do is first, I want to try and capture as much of that right-hand side of the pyramid as I can. But more specifically, I want to make sure that I get the left-hand side as well. So I'm going to shuttle to around 23 frames in. And once again, let's make sure this is all clear, nothing on here, okay. I'm gonna go with my free draw Bezier. Oh, Stargate. Gino, I think all of the DSLR and mirrorless cameras today, all the new, that's a interesting, so Gino's asking, anyone know of a good DSLR that records more than 30 minutes? Yeah, actually I think the 7D back then, I think it was 20 or 22. There were time limits. I don't know, I mean, I use a D50 now, and I'm a Nikon shooter now, But I don't know if there are still time limits. I mean, maybe some of the cameras do. I don't believe mine does. And as mentioned, there may still be some in some manufacturers. Certainly, though, new mirrorless ones must be able to do. I would think so. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not in the market. Why 30 minutes? Why was that arbitrary limitation in there? Probably had to do with maybe the formatting of the cards. I mean, they weren't using FAT32. It's so long ago, I don't remember. Maybe it had something to do with the format. Maybe there couldn't be larger than 2 gig files. That would be a FAT32 thing. I can't remember why, but it was a thing for several years that you had this limitation, which was a real drag if you were filming sort of, episodic things or doing something in a studio. You had to be really mindful that, okay, we got to take we're going to stop in 38 seconds and then pick it back up with a new card. So, or just start a new recording. So yeah, it wasn't, I don't remember. Okay. So I've done my mask. It's a little tight. It's not perfect, but that's okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to track backwards. So I just want to get a really accurate read on the pyramid, and specifically as the right edge moves off screen, that it tracks as it makes that change. It'll do that. It's what it doesn't see where it sometimes falls apart. But so first we're going to track backwards. And by the way, this is 23.976. Notice how quickly that's also, it's also 3 seconds, but super, super fast. Okay. And it did a pretty decent job of tracking that way. So let's go to, where were we? 23 seconds. And now let's track forward and see how it does for the rest of it. Go ahead and do that. Someone's saying, oh, it was an import tax restriction. It's a legal reason. Oh my God. Well, they don't have it anymore. Because no one cares. Because everything films video. It is interesting how much the industry has really sort of morphed and changed over the years. I mean, video was a coveted thing. And it was territorial. So what I'm doing now is I'm just making some adjustments to the mask. And then we're going to retrack again, going backwards, and see how it does. And it's interestingly, the one I just showed you, I did it in 2 passes. It was pretty solid. This one looks like it's not doing quite as well. And this got a little screwed up here. Now, you can, of course, go frame by frame and make changes. Just kind of zoom through here. All right, it's not bad. Got a little weird over here. Not gonna worry so much about that. Here's why. Because again, we've got mask expansion. Not gonna use that because it seems to already have expanded itself, but we are gonna use some feathering. So any color changes that we apply there, we can feather and smooth that edge and let it blend into the background so that it's basically, you don't really notice it, okay? That's gonna drive me a little bonkers though. I really screwed up the top of that. That sucks. Okay, so let's come in here now. And again, maybe we start by warming some of this up. Okay, maybe adding a little contrast. I don't know how this really missed the boat on this here somehow. Now you see right away, we're adding a little warmth in the sky there. So this is where just increasing that feather is going to take that edge right off. And you can see the dotted lines right there. As the dotted line crosses the edge of the pyramid, we're basically fading and smoothing that back into the sky range. All right. Maybe we'll add a little overall saturation. Something like this. You can bring the highlights down just a tad. All right. Now, click away, play this back. Not bad. Here's our before. Here's our after. And again, even though that mask wasn't totally perfect, you don't see the bleed. I mean, very, very subtly. But if you're not looking for it, you're not really going to notice. And also, it kind of just feels that way. That is how Giza feels. Okay? So now we've tackled that. All right. Now we want to sort of affect the overall image. Now, we could take this mask. In fact, maybe I'll do this. I didn't do this on the other one. I'm going to paste another instance of this, but let's invert the mask this time. And instead, let's add some blue like that. Okay, now that's affecting the ground a bit more. Yeah, okay, that's why I didn't do it that way. But do you see what I did? So in this case, the mask is everything outside of the pyramid. And for this, actually, I'd add a little bit of feathering, but instead of expanding the mask, I'd probably contract the mask. All right, so we can expand it or we can contract it. I'm just going to contract it so that it's a little bit tighter around the edges. Do some shadow, darkening there. And maybe drop some highlights. Now for this, again, there's a lot of detail that's missing in those clouds. It just wasn't captured at the center. And once it's gone, at the sensor, so once it's gone, it's gone. But we can use hue versus luma, which means I want to be able to affect the luminance value of a specific hue in my shot. Once you understand what these things mean, because first of all, hue versus, I know that's a standard thing. As a non-pro colorist, I remember seeing this for the first time. It doesn't really help you, but if you understand that you actually have to read it sort of right to left, it's the luminance of a particular hue. I guess that would be very long to write in a panel, but that's how it works. So I'm going to take my eyedropper. Now, obviously, this is just pure white. So let's try and get some of this sort of very, very soft blue. And you'll see it did just that. It made that selection. Now, one of the best things that we did, I love this. All props to the Premiere team. This is something which you see in other apps like Resolve, where, okay, I made my selection. I'm right at the edge here. Well, we have a slider so that you can drag the continuous color hue into view to make it easier to modify, to change. Really nicely done UI. I love that. Now, this being 8-bit, 13-year-old, probably less than 10 megabit H.264 footage, if we pull the luminance down too much, we're gonna get some artifacting. We're probably gonna see some blocky noise. But I just want to point out that when you click on this, now remember with hue versus hue, we saw the range of different colors. Now, because this is luminance, notice that north of the line, brightness, right? South of the line, dark. So we want to brighten, you want to, amplify the luminance, go this way. You want to de-amplify the luminance, go that way. De-amplify the luminance? That's not a thing. And look at that. Now, if this were, ProRes 422, you'd be like, wow, look at that. But you could even, I'm sure you can see over the stream, we're getting some blocky artifacting. So we can't go too far, but we can make it a little bit better, just a little bit. And on this, if I add a little bit of faded film, do you see that? I can kind of take the edge off, if you so desire, of those clouds. That actually looks pretty good. Do not sharpen. Let's see, maybe we can get away with a little bit of additional saturation there. And maybe drop the white just a little. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's feather that a little bit more. Okay. So, all right, the feathering here, this is the inverted mask. Not as great. This is a little more stylized. I got a little artifact. Maybe I can fix that with some of the expansion. Let's see. Oh, there you go. Right? It's a little halo-y. Not the best. I got experimental for you. We could have done the same thing with another instance of Lumetri. And again, so here's the one we just did. Here's the one I did earlier. This is a bit more natural looking. This one looks a little more Hollywood. A little more Brendan Fraser, The Mummy, you know. But this is where we started. So when you look at where we started and how we ended up, and again, experimental version number 2, really quickly you can start to stylize and kind of retool your color correction using just a lot of different tools. This, my original one, way better. But you get the idea. You saw how to do some different things. By the way, when you add, I just copy-pasted Lumetri into the effects panel here. When you go to the top of the Lumetri Color Panel, you now have this, it's the same. You're seeing this layer stack. So in this case, because we are, this is the inverted one, you can rename these. So you can do sky, you know, invert mask. And we can rename this one pyramid mask. Because it's very easy to forget sort of which sorry, I'm looking at this one here, which layers you're dealing with. So here's your pyramid mask layer, and then here's your sky layer. And by the way, because the pyramid mask looks so good, let's add another Lumetri. If we just wanted to use this one, drop the exposure, just, let's see, like a stop here, adjust some highlights, maybe add some contrast. Okay, like that, maybe add a vignette. And again, now you've got 3 different layers that you can mess around with. But, and by the way, I don't know if this is something, did this change in the latest version? Global effects mute, now it doesn't happen dynamically. I swore that you used to be able to on and off that. Now it waits till you stop. Now the difference between using this global effects mute and this mute is that this is only going to bypass the selected layer of Lumetri. This one is bypassing everything. That's why this one's important, because we have 3 layers going on. Okay? Okay. When you eyedrop pick a color, does it always pick the same size range? It does use the same size range, yes. So it's giving you sort of, think of it as color handles to, you know, in terms of your gradient of the hue to the left and right of that center color. So that center dot is the color you selected. Now, one thing I've said before, it has not changed. I will continue to say it and suggest it. And this goes for HSL, which we're going to cover now too. If you're going to give me an eyedropper, give me the preview. I need the square so I see what color I'm selecting, because it is very, very difficult otherwise to know. And part of that is because as you zoom in, and this is why I recommend zooming in. Here's a good example. You know, now again, this is a ProRes file, but it was transcoded from 444 to 422 HQ to 422. This might even be ProRes proxy, I don't know. But you know, if I were just trying to select eyes, you know, there's a lot of color noise in here. And that eyedropper might very well select a purple or reddish hue inside of this selection, even though the eyes are clearly blue-gray. If I don't have a little preview, I don't know what I'm selecting. So as much as I just praised the little slider UI here so that you can move the hue around, the community, you need a color preview. I don't know what I'm selecting here. But yes, that range, the dots, it's always the same. And then they're, as you saw, they're adjustable. You can move them. So you can tighten the range, broaden the range, okay? I don't know what it equates to in terms of sort of like pixel color depth or anything, all right? No sharp clouds. Okay. Yeah, Gino's confirming about Premiere's tracking versus AE. I mean, yes, as I said, way more powerful, way more advanced, more difficult to understand how to use. If you've never used After Effects, especially. If you're an After Effects person, no. But for someone who's an editor or just getting into Premiere and wants to do some of this stuff, I mean, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, go do that in After Effects. Yeah, okay. I mean, yes, you can watch videos. It's a little more complicated, but it is way more powerful, and you have a lot more control over the center point. And again, if you're doing planar tracking, that's something you can't really do here. All right, so this is another example. I've shown this one before where we're going to use, you know, hue versus sat, hue versus luma, a couple of those things, or maybe an HSL, specifically on something like the eyes. So this is the original shot with an input LUT. This is what we're going for. All right. And this one, as you can see, first of all, it's much more balanced. It's richer, but more specifically, his eyes they really pop, and not in a creepy, color corrected sort of way, and they also kind of match that sky, but it's just a beautiful shot. It's a very handsome person, and I just love this. And this was done by a firm in Germany called Silbersalz. They shot this, and it's beautiful footage. We've used this for years already. So this is what we're going for. And to do this, again, just to kind of reveal here, and then we'll do it. So we've got some hue versus sat, got some hue versus luma, and then we've got some HSL secondaries, specifically on the eyes, contained in a masked section, okay? And there are two flavors of Lumetri happening here. Face mask and then an overall, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So as mentioned, this is an example of where, well, first, maybe we'll do one layer first, just treating the overall shot. So first thing I might do, again, maybe I'll just bring those highlights down just a little bit, a little bright for me. Maybe some of the white. I might even come in here on the background just to kind of pump up some of these colors. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, a little bit of contrast as well. Okay, shadows all looking good. Exposure looks good. Don't need to touch much else. Once again, I don't want to warm or cool because it's global. That's not really what I want to do. And maybe I'll affect some of those other colors around it later. Give it a little bit of saturation. But primarily, I want to focus in on the face. So this is another example of where we're going to start a new layer. And right away, let's rename this face track. Let's take the ellipse here. And track around his face. And this one, you know, same thing. I mean, maybe the free draw Bezier would be better. You know, if that's your jam, entirely up to you. Yeah, see, this can get real squiggly. To Gino's point, who was just saying that moments ago. As mentioned, you know, it depends. You don't have to be super, super accurate. It just depends. I think that's going to be okay. A little liberal around the ears. Not going to worry too much about it. All right, I just wanted that piece of his neck too. Again, we can probably buy back a little bit of that with the expansion. So let's just go ahead and track this forward. Okay, mask path, track selected mask forward. I'd love to see an Adobe app for color primarily. Haha. Yes. Well, you know, where we got Lumetri came from, we did at one point have a very specific color app, and the tech of that got moved into Premiere, although not all of it, or not all of that functionality. Why am I forgetting what that was called now? SpeedGrade. SpeedGrade. It's still a request we hear. Okay. So for this layer now, because we have the face tracked, as you saw before, so this is where I might want to first just zero in on some of the elements of the face. So I'm going to use our hue versus sat, which means we're going to affect the saturation level of a selected hue, in this case some skin tone, and just warm that up a bit. Okay, we don't want to go too much, start looking like Transformers. Okay, and again, we can kind of go more to the reddish magentas, more to the orange yellow, but right in the center is that sort of, that's the sweet spot, that's the actual color that we selected. Okay, that might be a bit much, it's okay, I can overdo it for the stream here. And then, maybe just bring down the luminance just a little bit. Just going to bring back in a little bit of that definition. Now this is, because this is ProRes, we are seeing just a little bit more of the kind of skin imperfections. I like that. It's revealing some of that, and it's not blown out in his forehead there, but again, now we're starting to see noise if I go too far. Now we look sort of like a Van Gogh painting. By that, I mean that complimentary, but it looks painted as opposed to, you know, videographed. So just ever so subtly, just to kind of bring down some of the luminance at the top of his head there. But more specifically, because we have the face masked, this is now where I'm going to use those secondaries to affect the eye color. And for that, I'm really going to need to zero in here on the eyes, because as you just saw a minute ago, if I make a selection, I may be selecting pink or red. It's hard to kind of gauge. I could probably even go even a little closer. Ooh, that's way close, but this might serve us better. So I'm going to start by taking the eyedropper, and I'm going to find kind of a neutral blue. And you'll know that you got it right away, because when you make that selection, if your hue is lingering somewhere over here, you're in the wrong range. Now I'm going to turn on the color gray option here, and this section in black, this is showing us the area that's affected by this. And then we have our saturation over here, which we can expand or contract. And we have our luminance value, which we can expand. Now we may need to take another sample in here to get more of that eye. And I really didn't nail it with that. Maybe it's even a little further over, and it is. And some of that has to do with the fact that, again, there's quite a bit of color noise in there. So I may not get everything, but we'll get enough. Get enough of it to essentially do what we need. See if I expand that out a little bit. Let me zoom back out. Yeah, see, right now I'm starting to get some like reflection in his hair. I don't want that. So you need to push this back in a bit. All right. Okay. Not perfect, but it's okay. All right. Now, because we're really just focusing in on the blue of the eyes, we can come over here and we can affect them directly. Again, we can cool them off. Note they're looking a little warmer. I'll zoom in for you so you can see it better. Or we can make them sky blue. Right? Really nice. Now, as I'm looking at this too, remember we're still on the face mask, or the masked face. I'm going to bring that saturation down just a little, which is going to make the eyes pop even more. That's the wonderful thing, is that each of these modules is independent. So when you're doing your HSL Secondary, it is in fact selecting the native color present in the shot. So I can adjust this sat on the face. It's not going to affect the overall sat of anything else, and certainly not the eye range because it was a completely different color range altogether. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Before, after, again, it's subtle, but if you look at the eyes, they really now stand out. And then, if we go back briefly, let's zoom back out again, to the other layer. Here's where we can use a little hue versus sat. And by the way, as I mentioned, if you hold shift, it'll constrain so that you can't go left or right of that center point. Now again, I could desaturate it entirely, or I could saturate those blues. And let's get that gray luminance. Let's darken. Now again, this little, it's just because this is a very transcoded shot that we're getting a little bit of noise in there. I'm going to pull that down. Now remember, that's affecting the layer underneath, so it's affecting the face too. So on the face layer, I could also, remember, independent control here, I can just expose the face a bit more. And if needed, feather that mask so that we don't have any weird sort of delineations between the two. And then for the final piece, you may love it, you may hate it. I love it on this shot because it just feels like it has to be dramatic. By the way, this is the native flat shot, and this is what we have now. And how does that compare to the one I did before? Oh, the one I did before is even a little warmer. I was better off stream, what can I say? But this isn't bad. I like it. It's still good. We could probably, here, we'll give it a little bit more. Let's do a little overall saturation. Something like that. How's that compare? Oh, there you go. Now they're almost identical. Oh, I turned it off. Yeah. I actually like the new one now. The one we just did is even better. And there it is. Okay. Before, after. Now, you may not be a fan of a vignette. That's fine. Not everybody is. Again, we can toggle. That's the sort of background, the overall corrections that we did. And then we can go to face track. There's the face. There's the after. Okay. So with just a couple of really basic things, you can just really make something look so much better by doing some individual tweaks. And the HSL stuff is great. So for the last one, we've got about 10 minutes here. This was, I think this is like a 5 p.m. shot in San Francisco. But it was really, really cold. So I remember I wanted to, it was nice, it's great to see the sun like that, but I was sort of like, it would be cool to turn this. You don't often see that sun, that warm, I mean, you do, it's sort of golden hour, but that time of year, you didn't always see that. This was like a weird day, because you could see the clouds too. They were like, you're getting all this reflection of that sunlight. So this is where we could use HSL to specifically select that range of warm tones and then desaturate and turn them down to make them feel colder. Now, again, we could sort of just come in here and do something like this, which isn't illegitimate. But then you have this very sort of blue sky, and everything kind of has a blue tint. I mean, that could work. If you weren't really thinking about it, you wouldn't guess about it. And it does sort of look like a different time of day. But maybe we can do something that's a little more, I don't know, a little more cinematic with HSL, just as an experiment. And this, I bring this up as an experimental way to do things. As I mentioned, I'm not a colorist. I like to play around with color. I know how these things work, but you know, these are not how you should do things necessarily. There's lots of ways to do things. Experiment, have fun. That's actually where a lot of the brilliance in a lot of these things comes through. So in the same vein, we're going to start by taking a selection color, and we want to find a sort of neutral, warm tone. All right. And right away, let's see, we've got something that's pretty good. So we're going to expand some of the ranges here. There is some of that in the clouds up there. All right, we're going to expand that. This. Just sort of refining our mask. Okay, that color range looks pretty good. All right. And maybe we need to add in even some more, because it didn't get any of this building here. So let's see. Again, that's not getting that direct color, but it is kind of hitting everything to some degree. So let's see. By the way, you also have a minus eyedropper. Here, actually, you know what? Let's see what it is before I did that. Let's see how this one looks. So we're going to cool this. Whoa. All right, and you can see right away it has a colder vibe, because we're taking all the highlights. You can see the warm highlights in the clouds. Those are part of that color selection, and they're coming out. And in fact, let's not do this. Let's do midtones and shadows. A little more accurate here. It's going to give us a little more control. Pull these way down. And then let's affect the contrast of this as well. So we darken those mid-tone contrasts. That's not going to do it. Let's go into our shadows here. Let's cool off the shadows. Ooh. Let's increase the contrast there. So we still maintain sort of that time of day, but just not quite as warm. All right? And maybe we even keep the highlights a little bit warm. That's up to you. Okay? Now it looks like we almost desaturated a little too much. So maybe I'll bring some of this back in those midtones. All right? And if at any point in time, like if we wanted to add, again, some more of this here, we could do that. Maybe this building over here. I think that actually looks pretty good. All right? And then that's with that specific color range. So now we can come back up to the top, drop some of the white, increase the black level, which is going to bring back some of the reds down here, add some contrast, maybe lift some of the shadows. Before, after. And that almost gives us that bleached look. Note the sky doesn't change at all. But this feels more like that day normally feels in San Francisco. Didn't affect the reds either. You can see it down here. Right, all these other colors, green, not affected. It's just that sun warmth. That's pretty good. That's a really nice bleach. That actually looks legit. Okay, again, this was the before. I did it better earlier. This one, there's a lot more color here. So this was my earlier one. There's the before. There's the after. I just got better selections. Okay? But good example, two variations of the same theme. This one looks a little bit more bleached. This one has a little more residual color in it. And you can see the shadow. Oh, it looks like I also added some faded film there to add a little more low contrast. Yeah, this one's better. But this is where we started. Now that looks like two completely different days. But it was all just done with HSL. All right. So that's it, my friends. That's the end of today's stream. And we're going to be back next week. I'll be joined by my colleague Abhi Singh, and we're going to be talking about team projects for collaboration. Now, when we showed this a couple years ago, I think even a year ago, but a couple of years ago, team projects collaboration was only something that you had available if you were using the Creative Cloud Teams plan. But now, team projects collaboration is available to anyone who has Premiere Pro. So if you're looking to collaborate with people, you just have the individual version of Premiere. You're going to want to check that out. Till then, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.